Welcome to FacilitiesU. FacilitiesU is a practical learning space for facilities and operations leaders managing complexity at scale. It's built for people who are responsible for uptime, compliance, and cost control across growing portfolios. Today's session is FacilitiesU 301, building strong facilities and operations across the U.S. This course is designed for facilities managers who are leading national portfolios, complex vendor ecosystems, and high-stakes operational uptime. We're joined by T. McCluster, Head of National Corporate Facilities at KFC U.S. T oversees facilities and maintenance programs for all corporate-owned KFC restaurants across the country, working at the intersection of cost discipline, operational uptime, and national brand standards. T, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. Let's start with the big picture. You've operated at multiple levels of facilities leadership. I noticed you were an AFM at some point, area facilities manager, and then moved up to the national scale. From your perspective, what fundamentally changes when facilities responsibility shifts from a regional scope to a national one?
So the biggest challenge is that execution alone is no longer enough. At the national level, facilities coverage becomes more of a governance function. You move from solving individual problems to designing systems to prevent problems at scale. The decisions to have a standard defensible and repeatable are no longer managing just buildings. You're asked to manage the risk, the consistency, and financial discipline across the portfolio.
Well, you mentioned kind of scaling facilities operations across dozens or hundreds of locations. What are some of the hidden risks that someone new to your position or someone aiming for your position may encounter as they grow and scale the way you have professionally?
The biggest risk is the lack of visibility, to be honest with you. Sometimes you have unauthorized work, inconsistent scopes. You might have duplicate vendors and informal approvals from different areas of operation. So that's the biggest challenge of that.
The need for oversight scales, alongside a company's footprint, right? So how do you balance national maintenance standards with effective regional execution, right? One of those perfect balances of facilities.
So nationally, you set the standards, and then regionally, you own the execution. We define what good looks like in scope, response time, and documentation with compliance. The cost expectation is really not non-negotiable with me. Regional teams are encouraged to be empowered to execute inside those guardrails.
Got it. Vendor management often becomes one of the biggest pressure points. From your experience, how does vendor strategy need to evolve, as your portfolio grows?
So for me, you have to move from transactional vendor to strategic partners. This means fewer vendors, clearer scope, and performance-based scalability. The skill to work with vendors like that is sometimes hard to manage, but you have to be consistent, have to have open dialogue and communication.
You sometimes hear other facilities managers kind of use the phrase with vendors, hey, we're dating, we're not married, right? How do you balance long-term, vendor partnerships while you also have to balance performance, speed, right, of your work orders being completed, and then also cost control, right? We're all adhering to an overall budget. So how do you balance those vendor relationships with expectations?
So for me, partnerships doesn't mean we're going to be comfortable at all times. It means that we have to have open and transparent conversations. We have to hold each other accountable. Most of the times, FMs look at the vendor partnership as a one-way street. I don't believe in that. I believe that my vendors are an extension of my internal department and my internal labor. So we have to track them just like we track them internally as well too. Whether it's time, labor, invoicing, accountability, scope of work, and all those things, and being able to follow the chain of command on the vendor side as well too. When problems arrive, I don't necessarily need to go to the top, right? Just like internally with my group, I have supervisors that regional supervisors that sit before me that are more than capable of handling any kind of problems. But if the vendor feel the needs to escalate it to me, then I'll chime in. So it's definitely a two-way street with vendor management.
How do you kind of focus or deal with preventative maintenance, being kind of proactive as opposed to reactive? And is that something that you're able to do, at a grand scale? Is that something that you empower your, regional managers to do in terms of getting ahead of things and, making sure that you're not, affecting any, customer support or any of your staff support?
So we rely on the data first, but the data is only as good as the system that we give it. So constantly ensuring that the asset tags are placed on the equipment. We're actually in the process of completing the compliance to retag some of our equipment in order to log that information inside our CMS system. By being able to capture that data and relying on that data, understanding it, those systems advise you on your age and your cost and your recommendations. So that's how we process that at a high level.
As a former area facilities manager myself, I was constantly facing the repair versus replace issues. It seems like you're doing things with, asset evaluations that are pretty modern. So can you speak just a little bit more to how you handle the repair versus replace and, some of the things that you're doing, tagging assets with either cost that they've endured or lifetime or, downtime, things like that?
So that's a critical point, and the data tell us what's happening. Field visit tell us why it's happening. Seeing the conditions firsthand, going out there, whether it's getting the feedback from your internal facility specialist. Sometimes your supervisors have to go out there. Just the other week, firsthand, I had a critical issue right before the holidays and had to catch a next day flight up to Louisville, right, to get boots on the ground. So understanding the situation, understanding the recommendation from the vendor, and assessing it to make a real time boots on the ground decision at some point.
So it sounds like you are someone who really sees the importance in field visits and real world observation when you're making those capital decisions, or even just dealing with, R&M, sometimes routine or things that come up. How important is it for you that your regional managers are on site every day, each location, kind of getting their eyes on things, as opposed to just relying on data, work orders, emails, communication, things like that?
So I require my supervisors to make biweekly field visits. They set up their own schedule, but they'll spend a full day in the field every other week. This ensures that we are able to first and foremost follow up on the quality of work and standards from our internal team, right? Facility specialists, and then follow up on an audit, vendor work, right? And then if time permits, because this is facilities, it's fluid, right? If it's an escalation or critical problem that falls on their actual visit date, that they can go out there and be boots on the ground, right? They're empowered to make the decisions because that's the reason why I selected them to sit in the seats that they sit in, entrusting them, empowering them, and then they know that I'm only a ping away, whether that's text message, Teams, or a phone call or video chat to advise them of the situation if they don't feel comfortable with making that decision on their own.
If I could follow up on one direct thing you said, you mentioned that there is a role that you play in, in your leadership, moving from execution to empowerment, right? Meaning you want your regional managers, supervisors to be empowered and be able to solve issues on their own. Was that something you were comfortable with right away? Is that something because, as new people step into roles similar to yours across their professional landscapes, any advice for how you came to trust and empower your staff to make your whole operation like as proactive and powerful as possible?
So I tend to follow all the positive. Well, let me start over. I tend to repeat all the positive things when I was a facility specialist, right? I can remember taking the lead on coordinating projects, and my VP will walk by on a Monday or a Tuesday or the following day, coming in and say, "Hey T, good job on that." So that encouraged me to duplicate those actions repeatedly. And when I did have hiccups, it was a coaching moment that said, "Hey T, after this meeting, hey, step in my office," right? Now it was a 10-point scale. He congratulated me on those 8 points, and then he coached me on those -2s, right? And so I tend to do that with my guys. I can specifically remember early on, my Texas supervisor, Matt Rodriguez, less than 30 days in, we had to replace a grease trap, and he's new to the QSR world. He was like, "T, I don't know what I'm doing." So I asked him a simple question. I said, "Have you ever replaced a RTU?" He said, "Yes." I said, "It's the same system. A system of replacing critical infrastructure and critical equipment. The policy and the steps are the same, just the equipment is different." He got it just like that. So that empowered him right now. And in 12 months, he replaced 3 of them, and we actually have actively have one going on as we speak right now that he's overseeing. Just keep me briefed and updated on it.
Yeah, it definitely seems like, as you were coming up through the ranks, you were coachable, and now you're kind of, trying to find staff that are coachable as well. That's a great, great philosophy. Now, even though you kind of supervise your own team, how do you manage the relationships with operations, supply chain, franchise teams? Is there anything that you can kind of advise working with different departments on a national scale, and kind of making sure that you're all communicating, flowing together, swimming upstream together, whatever the cliche would be?
So, unfortunately, in my national roles, I don't have any responsibility or to support the franchise community or either brand that I went with. I strictly work with corporate and corporate only. So taking out that aspect of not having to deal with them, but alignment internally with the your other departments, is just come down to basic life skills of communication, right? Having open dialogue and positioning facilities as you build out this particular situation is that facilities is new in KFC, right? So we're building this from the ground up. Often on time, like on LinkedIn, you hear me use the terms architects of facilities. That's something that we coined ourselves within inside me and my leadership, all the way down to our techs, right? Because we have the opportunity to actually build a department within inside this great organization from scratch, right? Many people don't get that opportunity. So advising leadership, so they understand that we're here to support the operation roles, right? It's like growing up, we're here, but not doing jumping jacks to let them know that you're here. It's just always being supportive of their needs, being attentive, and working the back office and building the relationship with departments is similar to advisory sometimes, advising them, not making decisions on their behalf, coaching them in other areas, and then sometimes making decisions and then coming back and informing them why we made this decision. So to wrap it all up in a simple one word answer, it's just communication.
Yeah, and I always found, being in the facilities world myself, a lot of it, and my old boss when I was working as an AFM for a luxury gym always said, being in facilities is about doing the right thing when no one is looking, right? We're kind of like the behind the scenes warriors. We're the people that are there, behind closed doors, working on electrical, plumbing, all the kind of pillars. So, is there any advice that you have for someone, again, who's coming up in the facilities world, something like that, something like, doing the right thing when no one is looking, or kind of the proactivity, or anything that helped you, achieve the professional acumen that you have?
I would say, for and first most, my philosophy when it comes to facilities, right? You have to, in order to get to this stage, you have to enjoy tangibility, right? That's why we all got into it first, right?
Yeah.
You know, the toilet was leaking and you stopped the leak, right? You felt the urge and a rush, right? You have to learn that part, right? Tangibility then turns to craftsmanship, right? You had to learn to build and repair, replace those broken items and feel good and confident and get that same rush like I did that, right? So that translated to always putting yourself first, with doing the right things. We have a team chat here in my KFC facilities department right now, and oftentimes the guys put in great work, like, you know, I did this, I did that, and challenge the other guys, right? I love to see that craftsmanship competition, right? It lets me know that they're putting thought, effort into the repairs that they're making, also into their craft. That in turns produce great time fix rates on the first time. That reduces downtime, reduces and produces uptime for the restaurants.
You know, that is really helpful because we like to leave listeners with kind of practical takeaways. So that's definitely, you know, things like this or things that up and coming facilities managers can kind of focus on, you know, on a national level. And we can kind of start wrapping it up here with this kind of last question. But what are one or two principles that they should focus on immediately if they do want to grow to oversight of a company across the country, right? Like what are, you know, one or two principles they can start working on now so they can lead large teams, so they can find success on a national level?
I think the first is that trusting yourself first. Treat your career journey just like you treat a repair, right? You know, you assess it, you diagnose it, you know, you get the materials and the tools in order to make the repair.
Yeah.
And then empowering your team that's around you. At this level, it's not more of what you can do with your hands. It's really what you can do with your mind, foreseeing what's coming, and empowering those up under you to coordinate your vision. I use a lot of sports analogies within my team. So I'm the head coach. My regional supervisors are the offense and the defensive coordinators, and my facility specialist is are the active players on the team on the field, right? I don't position myself as a boss. I'm just a leader, and I'm in the game with you guys at all time. You know, I'm on the field. That's why in this high level of communication, we move to a team setting where we're all in there because we can communicate in real time. We're always watching. Every member of my team has the team app on their cell phones, so we can communicate in real time if you need that. That empowers people, and that's are some of the tricks that I've learned in order to be able to grow into my career.
Yeah, and it's a great analogy because even if you're a head coach and you've got, you know, your game's about to end and you need a 2-point conversion to tie or take the lead, the head coach is still going to trust their offensive coordinator. They're still going to allow them to call that last play because you put the people in place that you trust to make those decisions.
Correct.
So again, it's a great analogy for the ways that, you know, national supervisors can empower their teams and show that, hey, we're all a team. We're going to support your decisions, and then that empowerment kind of trickles down. You know, so it allows a quarterback to audible out of a play. Allows, maybe not in college, but in the pros, and things like that as you go down the line. You know, I think the last question I'd have is just, you know, as you scaled past 50 locations, as you grew and grew, what are some facilities mistakes that maybe you made in your early days that you now can hand down to someone else and say, hey, don't do that. Like, learn from my mistakes, things like that. And I know it's tough sometimes to look back and look back at things that we may not have handled correctly, but I think it's great for someone to take in and to learn and to maybe think about what you're going to say as they try to make those correct decisions.
I think scaling, it depends on the way that your particular organization scales, right? It's often faster to scale by inquiring locations and within a particular brand. Requesting as much data on the building as possible, right? That has been one of the biggest mistakes, right? Because as an organization, as leadership, sometimes facilities does not have a seat at the table. We're standing at the door, right?
Yeah.
So as they're setting up these deals, a lot of what we have to do, which is so important to the organization and the business, right, is and not by fault, but just a second thought instead of a first-hand thought. And not getting that information on building data can slow down the process of turnover from organization to organization, because we have to deal with the compliance issues to bring the building back up to standards in any municipality, right, and any jurisdiction. And those requirements can change from one side of the street to the second side of the street, right?
Yeah.
And from operations, when they're looking at the P&L and just numbers, they don't really understand the delay in time and the different requirements from unit A to unit B, and they're only a mile apart or 2 miles apart, right? But in different, jurisdictions. So just gathering as much information on a particular location will save a lot of headache as you tend to scale. So that would be my advice.
We really appreciate it, T, and we really appreciate the time that you've provided us here. It's really refreshing to hear someone at your level that is able to utilize analytics, able to utilize asset evaluations. It really seems like you're kind of melding a heavy facilities experience and road taken with kind of modern approaches to facilities, which again is something that I hope that everyone can take away. Everyone is going to look, really good when they can bring the data to the table about, again, asset evaluation, repair versus replace, things like that. I think this was really open, and we really appreciate the feedback that you've given us.
Well, I appreciate the invite, and good luck in your podcast endeavors. Thank you to your coordination team for seeking out me. I really appreciate the opportunity, and have a blessed and wonderful day.
T, thank you so much. To everyone listening, this was FacilitiesU 301, building strong facilities operations across the U.S. At LIMPR, this is exactly the category of operational challenge we study deeply alongside facilities teams managing complex portfolios. If this conversation reflects challenges you're navigating today, know you're not alone, and we look forward to continuing to learn the future FacilitiesU sessions. Thank you for joining us.